Kate, I used to play Age of Empires. This is what I wanted to say.
Oh, awesome. We're very busy finishing up Age of Empires 4 at the moment.
Yeah.
It's supposed to come out, I think, October 28th.
Well, I used to play it on 2000, 2001, 2001. I was really a fan of it and just wanted to let you know about it. I forgot to. Great game. I mean, it stands out as an example of hi everyone. We will start in 2-3 minutes. Okay. So I would like to welcome you all. My name is Nicholas Panagiotou. I am Associate Professor at School of Journalism and Mass Media Communications, Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, Greece, and the head of Design Global. I would like to welcome you in this webinar that constitutes part of our series of gamification. This event is organized with the support of State Department Citizens and Cultural Exchanges Office and in cooperation with World Learning, whom we really thank. It is part of our series regarding the gaming and also part of our series of webinars, Ideas in Action, that we started these events from March 2020. Today's webinar is titled Global Game Jam. It is part of the series of virtual events titled Serious Games Against Disinformation, but also games as part of a new expanding industry. We are really happy to host this event also with Game Jam and having with us Kate Edwards, which is a well-known for her culturalization work in the video game industry and her award-winning industry advocacy efforts, including her current role as Executive Director of the Global Game Jam and the former role as Executive Director of the International Game Developers Association. During her time at Microsoft, and this is what we were discussing before, Kate has worked on many game franchises. Age of Empires, I used to play that game, so I will start from that one. Dragon Age, Modern Warfare, Mass Effects, and many others that are well known. And together with us, we also have Joshua Sen, which is a strategic designer, interactive media and games, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. It is Joshua portfolio is to explore ways to integrate gaming and gamification and new communication technologies with existing State Department policy needs, key audiences, and programs. I would like to thank both of our speakers for being today with us in order to share their valuable expertise. Kate, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here. It's nice and early here on the West Coast of the US. I'm based in Seattle, but thank you for that kind introduction. I've been working in games as a geographer. That's my background. So I'm a geographer and cartographer who's been working in games for over 27 years now. And in tech in general for about 30 years. So it's been a fun journey, and the need for this kind of knowledge, external subject matter expertise that is not typical in the game industry is something that I really enjoy about being in the game industry, because I know people who are historians, ethnomusicologists, astronomers, physicists, all found their way to the game industry because the creative media requires that kind of background expertise. I'm going to share my screen just to give you a brief overview of the Global Game Jam for people who are not familiar with our organization. What the Global Game Jam is essentially it's the world's largest game creation event that takes place every January. So just to back up a little bit, the basic mission of this organization is to empower individuals worldwide to learn, experiment, and create together through the medium of games. So this organization got started actually got started in 2008, but the very first Global Game Jam was in 2009. And this was all being done under the umbrella of the International Game Developers Association, which I used to run. So right as I came on board to run the IGDA, that's when the Global Game Jam was leaving the IGDA to become its own nonprofit, which it left in 2012 and established its own nonprofit in 2013. The basic ethos of the Global Game Jam, which is really important to us, is that we are not a competition. We are an opportunity for collaboration and learning and education. That's why this event came out of the Game Education Special Interest Group in the IGDA, because it was all about helping people learn how to make games as a form of artistic self-expression and really democratize game development as a form of artistic self-expression around the world. And so it's really focused on our community and all the great communities that are fostered through this activity. And so we are never a competition. So because also if you pose it as a competition, that's when a lot of people who feel they may not have the skills, they won't get involved because they feel they're not ready to compete. So that's another reason why we don't frame it as a competition. The main things that we're involved with, like I mentioned, we have our main event, which takes place in January every year, usually at the very end of January. We have an event for younger creators, for 12 to 17-year-olds, which happens usually in the middle of the summer, like July, August. And that's a fairly new event. We also have an academic conference, which is the International Conference on Game Jams, the ICGJ, which takes place usually in the spring or summer. It's a small event because the research community around game jams and hackathons is not huge, but it is growing. And then we also do partner jams, like we're actually doing a partner jam with the State Department later this year, with one of the departments there. Which is basically gives our community something else to do, a fun activity to engage with outside of our main events. Just to give you a sense of the scale, the main event that we do in January, so these were our numbers from 2020, which was the last time we did a live event. So you can see this is quite a large event where we had almost 49,000 people, 118 countries, and in one weekend, in about 48-hour period, they created over 9,600 games around the world. And you can see some of the demographic breakdown there at the bottom to give you an idea of who they were and what kind of tools they were using. And so it's a very large event. And so every single year up to 2021, every single year since the jam started in 2009, it has grown bigger and bigger and bigger. Now you can see in 2021, we had to pivot to an online format because of the pandemic, and we had never done that before. And we did expect our participation to drop, but we were still really happy that we had about 60% of our usual crowd. So you can see the numbers are still really strong, and we are very happy with this level of participation, despite the fact that we were dealing with, a virtual format. And, we still had 6,400 games created in a few days, which is still pretty amazing to me. And the basic way we run this, I'm not going to read through all of this, but basically, just to give you an idea of how the event works, we have a keynote video, which really kicks off the event. That's what starts the whole event. That's where we have a keynote speaker, which is usually some well-known industry figure giving a kind of a brief inspirational speech. And then the main thing that happens is at the end of the video, we reveal the unique theme for that year. And so that theme is kept very secret. And we spend about 2 or 3 months determining what the theme is going to be for the year. And you can see some examples. In 2020, the theme was repair. And in 2021, the theme was lost and found. And we try to keep the themes fairly generic and kind of high level because we need the concept to work across many different cultures and languages so people understand what the theme is supposed to mean. Plus, we want to keep it somewhat vague because that's part of the fun of the event, is seeing all the amazing games that get created with this theme. And frankly, as a geographer and a social scientist, that's one of my favorite parts of this entire job, is being able to see the interpretation of that theme across so many cultures. It's just fascinating to me. We also have something we call diversifiers, which often will have additional challenges on top of the main theme. So for example, a diversifier could be make a game that's 4-player cooperative style, so it has to be a multiplayer game with 4 people. That would be a specific challenge. Or some of our sponsors will say, make your game using the Microsoft game stack as your backend technology. So that's another form of challenge. So you can see here this map, as a cartographer, I don't like the way this choropleth map was made, but basically you can see the extent of our growth, with the lighter colors being the countries that have joined the jam in more recent years. So we're always trying to grow the event, and we're continually trying to expand to more countries and regions as best as we can. We hope to get to Antarctica one of these days, get some of the researchers down there to get involved, and maybe even the International Space Station one of these days. We'll see. But we're very happy with this growth, and every year we try and add at least a few new territories to our list. Our next big event is coming up, GGJ Next. It's actually coming up pretty soon, next month. So this is the event that's targeting the younger folks, because the Global Game Jam event in January is primarily for 18 and older, because we have a lot of college students and adults, professionals who get involved in it. But we had a lot of demand from younger people that they want to learn the skills as well. So what we did is create this event a few years ago, and you can see it's a much longer event. We don't have young people doing a 48-hour jam. Instead, they have a week where they learn, they have curriculum and learning, and then they have a whole week where they actually apply those skills during the game jam. And we have the curriculum that has been developed by a team on our side. A lot of educators who teach game design have come up with curriculum that's available on our GGJ Next website. So to give you a sense of who we are as a staff, it's a pretty small staff for such a large reaching organization. So you can see this is basically how it breaks down. Tim is based here in Seattle, like I am, and then Tarja, she just recently came on board as our director of communications from Finland, originally from Qatar, and then Zane is in Toronto, and our board members are pretty much scattered across the world, and we're really proud of the fact that we have a lot of global diversity represented in our board, and they're a great group of people. They're very well engaged on our mission. So that's basically the short story. That gives you just a very brief overview of who we are and what we do. So I hope that was helpful. So I will stop sharing that.
Thank you, Kate. Very innovative, and there are things that are very interesting. Like one question, it would be how kids respond to this actually call for action, the event that you initiated in 2018, and some other questions that I have. But let's first listen to Joshua as well. I will pass the floor now to Joshua. And my first question before he starts his presentation would be, how can a diplomat is part of games and gamification? Joshua, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nikos. And I really have big shoes to fill. Really, really honored to be here, but to follow Kate is very difficult. You guys couldn't have lined up a more inspiring, talented, experienced person to talk about this, then where game development is going, some of the organizations. And that's why the State Department has been very excited for a chance to work with her and the Global Game Jam community. I'm also very thrilled that the Global Game Jam community is starting to network with DCN, because in my time here working in the State Department here in Washington, I would say the two of your organizations will rank right up there as the one that has impressed me the most. And I've worked with a lot of organizations because of the scale of what you are able to accomplish with, frankly, very minimal resources. And that's due to not just the talents, of course, of the leadership in your respective organization at DCN and Global Game Jam, but also just the wonderful members and participants who join. So if the State Department, we spend a lot of money every year. USAID does the same thing to do programs, and I've seen a lot of them. And what you guys are doing is very inspiring. And it's kind of like the template I will be holding others to meet and match going forward. So just quickly to reference your question, the world of diplomacy is about really convening people together. And then that's the way I look at my job over the 14 years I've been working in the State Department as a diplomat for the United States. That's the best. I think the best diplomats are often citizens of the United States, of other countries, getting together to talk about things they care about, to activate really creative ideas together, and hopefully get a chance to work together across cultural and national borders. So if I could think of a medium that reflects this, I think game development, but gameplay, esports, all of those things really, really make sense in this space. So I'm really, I had the really a unique ability to create this portfolio in the State Department to tackle video games from the ground up. I got started because in 2019, the State Department, some very senior officials were thinking about, hey, there are a lot of video gamers. At that time, they threw out a number like 2 billion. And what's the State Department doing to engage this large audience? And all of the senior officials just stared in the room, not having an answer. And so my boss, one of the senior officials in the room, came back and said, this is something that our bureau, called the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, should take the lead on. We are a bureau that is doing all of these exchanges, people-to-people exchanges for 80 years. Programs like Fulbright, but also ones like the International Visitor Leadership Program, but also supporting the Digital Communications Network as well. So we sent artists, athletes, chefs, musicians, scientists, journalists, everything, businessmen and women, everything you could think of, to connect with each other and bring them to the United States, send Americans overseas. In the same way, someone like Kate is the type of people we want to send overseas. And hopefully all of you on the call today are people eventually we can bring to the United States someday to learn from American experts as well. So what is it about video games? I have to admit, I don't have any of that illustrious game development background. And I think my gameplay background really took a real big pause about 15 years ago, once I started working in the State Department. I got to get very serious. I got to put the childish things behind me. And lo and behold, 15 years later, I'm back here. And this has been the most rewarding part of my career so far. So we are in it because we want to, I mentioned, bridge cultural and national gaps, build those understandings. May I share a presentation as well? I don't want to
please
get
do.
too much into detail, like just belabor every slide, but let me do that right now. All right. So this is the first time I'm using this software, so I can't find the share screen. but you guys get it, so I'm not going to worry about the share screen mode. So again, this is our Bureau of Educational Cultural Affairs. Everything that we do in the State Department, you know, whether it is a basketball player to a rock musician to a journalist, every program that we do typically has to align to policy, you know. So for us, video games are a part of technology, and the technology of the future includes video games. So I kind of restated it. And as I learn more about it, it's not just, you know, building cultural understanding and things like that, but video games and the design element that goes behind it offer really, really important professional skills that are important today. It could be the storytelling, the creativity, the AI element of, you know, testing out scenarios, to VR and AR design in the future for across multiple industries. It's really a leading edge of what you know, next generation careers are going to require. And some of the demographics, I think most of you already know. It's estimated at about $180 billion right now. Certainly has gone up significantly during the past year. About 2.7 billion gamers. Here in the United States, we always are very interested on how it impacts communities here in terms of jobs and employment and educational opportunities. I mentioned that in the United States, there are about 500 US universities and colleges that offers courses or even degrees in game design. You know, one of the things that we always care about, we've been working on a lot, is getting women and girls into the STEM fields. So, you know, a research out of a British university found that active gamers, girls who are active gamers are 3 times more likely to go into the career. And we know that the game design engines like Unity or Unreal, those certifications are highly sought after career skill sets. For the United States, I'm in a field called public diplomacy. You know, we have our political diplomats, our economic diplomats. I'm in the public diplomacy realm. We want to go to where the audience is. We can't expect people to come to us, right? About 70 years ago, we did a lot with jazz. So jazz really translated across borders, especially in the behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War, and jazz was a really good medium to connect with people. And we still love jazz, and we still send out a few every year, but we need to update ourselves to what people are interested in. So the audience is interested in video games. Thinking of you, DCN, as you guys think about what events and activities, this is where the audience is interested. And in a way, the media is also very interested too, because people are still, governments, local media, people who aren't gamers, they're always very curious how video games are being rolled out in their home countries. So you can get a lot of good press coverage if you talk about video games as well. We also want to attract the United States wants to attract talented foreigners who are interested in video game to come into our ecosystem. So whether it is attending our university and learning our values, incorporating that into game design, it's, you know, we want them to kind of play in this ecosystem rather than an ecosystem where, you know, everything is maybe, you know, the values isn't the same. And then countering, you know, malign foreign influence on these platforms. So in terms of our policy priorities, we want to increase America's global competitiveness, So again, those jobs and those type of things, we always do care about, you know, selling American products. You know, I don't want to be crass, but that's still important. We want to definitely bolster democratic principles in civil society, counter disinformation, and you know, video games is a way of facilitating, you know, intercultural connections without requiring a huge budget a lot of times. So we're right now, for example, we are experimenting with esports clubs playing with each other, as well as some Twitch streams where we can have discussions, we can host seminars like this while playing a video game. We want to promote reconciliation through esports, promote educational and serious game development, and provide mentorship for people looking for those careers. So how we promote, we're setting up a whole about just over a dozen esports clubs right now across the world, and hopefully that will grow. This will be our first set. So they will be held out of American spaces. We have a rich culture of esports clubs in secondary schools. So that's about ages 14 to 18 across the United States. We think that is a model that a lot of countries would be interested in. How to set it up, how to make sure that it is friendly. We can help parents see that there's value in learning these skill sets. It's not just playing video games for to get screen time, but also learning a lot of practical skills like organizational building, marketing, even shoutcasting for careers. Serious game jams. Here you can see the logo for a global game jam, as well as another organization called Games for Change that we've worked with. We think, you know, the concepts that can come out of game development can be a very important tool to tackle any number of issues. And then mentorship opportunities, again, connecting people who are aspiring game developers with American experts who can help provide them with guidance, kind of walk them through some of the career advice. In the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, we have a number of programs. You see on the left, I mentioned Fulbright, but there's also Tech Women, cultural preservation, English language programs. You see the DCN in there, sports diplomacy. We think any number of these programs can integrate video games into it. And some examples of what we've done. I mentioned the Games for Social Good Forum that DCM put on. That was a great example, 2019 in September in Armenia. We've also done speakers, virtual speakers, game developers to Tunisia. We had this esports club activation in Mexico. And in China, we had a NBA 2K professional, an MVP, most valuable player of the NBA 2K league, go to China to play NBA 2K with Chinese youth. So any number of these things are ways that we can integrate it. And really, these are just what we do. What you guys do in your lives, in your careers, there is always a way to integrate, I think, video games into the programs to attract a new audience, to get people to think a little bit differently. So I'm not a gamer, you know, like I said, it's been 15 years, but I understand that video games are a medium where we can really broaden cultural understanding, build those career skill sets, and you know, just have fun as well. So on that note, I'm really interested in any other questions you guys may have.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you very much for the presentation and giving us an overview of actually the current situation and actually the initiatives that have been taken. I consider them very important in terms that an organization, to the extent and the size of State Department, is systematically taking a look at an important aspect and actually has been involved. Let me start with Kate. Kate, regarding the 2018 initiative to engage children from the age of 12 to 18 years old, what is the scope of this initiative, and what are the results up until now?
Well, basically the idea there is that, like I mentioned before, is that we really, one of the core goals of the Global Game Jam is to democratize game development. And that has already been happening to a certain degree because a lot of the tools that are available for game development have become free. They're readily available. Obviously, there's a technology gap. So for people who are living in locations where the technology itself, like a laptop or something, is harder to access, that's the real barrier of entry at this point. But if they do have access to a computer, then the tools for actually creating games are out there, and most of them are free now, or there's some version of them that are free. And there's a ton of education that's available on YouTube and a lot of other, things out there like Global Game Jam Next. We have our entire curriculum is up there on the ggjnext.org website. So anybody who wants to go and use it, they're welcome to use it. So the whole idea there was because we have so many younger people who are expressing interest in game development, and I think that's very natural. I mean, it's no different from kids who like to draw or to do art when they're younger in school, and if they express an interest in doing this more seriously, then obviously we facilitate giving them the access to those tools that they need. And it's similar with game development. We want to make sure that it's easy for them to have access to these skill sets. So that's really kind of the reason why GGJNet was created. And it was really created out of demand because obviously younger people today, they all grow up with video games. Everybody does, even more so than my generation. Well, I mean, when I was young, we didn't have any video games. My first video game was Pong, and I was 7 years old when Pong showed up. So, but today games are so ubiquitous. It's a form of entertainment that overshadows television for a lot of the younger people. They play more games than television, watch television, or consume other forms of media. And if they do watch something, oftentimes they're watching Twitch, which is where they're watching other people play video games. So it's become such a strong theme in a lot of young people's lives. And also, to Joshua's point, one of the things that I think is really fantastic about games, along with other media as well, but I think games today, especially for the younger generation, it is an instant connection point between cultures. It's like you may disagree on certain things culturally, but all you have to do is say, what's your high score on this game? Or do you like playing this game? Or do you like playing that kind of game? And instantly the conversation shifts towards this camaraderie that's all focused on that shared passion about the game. And that's one of the things I love, is that it's an instant form of diplomatic connection between different cultures. And I mean, we've seen many, many examples of this around the world in different forms of game jams. So that's really the goal behind it, is to make that connection. And like I mentioned in my overview, it's about community building around the passion for creating games and the passion for games as a medium.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Based on what you actually just underlined, I would like also to ask Joshua, we have a large extended audience, as Kate mentioned. We do have a community, but how can you actually turn this community from entertainment into political action community, if I might use the word? How you can actually motivate them to shift from something that it is fun to something that it might be not so fun, or it might be hardcore issues. Joshua?
Great question. So with these global game jams, I think when they discuss when Global Game Jam comes up with a theme like repair or lost and found, it's very broad, and it allows the creativity of game developers to explore different avenues. And oftentimes those narratives, those stories from the games will be something actually very serious. It could be something silly as well, but it can often be very serious without much guidance. What we are trying to do is push it a little bit more into that serious realm. So, for example, the partner jam that we're working with Global Game Jam coming up is about protecting cultural antiquities. It's an issue that the State Department has oversight and does programming, helping local law enforcement identify and protect their cultural heritage in their country from looting and illegal black market trade. So raising awareness of this is a policy priority for us. And so the partner jam will be focused on this topic. We will introduce experts in this field to brief the game developers before they create the game. And then the games will be more steered towards that direction. We do have one in 2022 coming up, hopefully working also with Global Game Jam, related to conservation, especially ocean conservation, which is, of course, now a priority for us again. And so we are going to invite scientists, people, activists working in ocean conservation, and connect them with game developers. And so they will be able to feed their ideas to game developers. So in this case, educate the game developers about what they need. And then also educate the activists about, hey, you want to get your word out. You want to raise awareness of your concerns about environmental protection. This is a new way to channel that. So get them thinking about this. What we cannot do, is to say we are going to create a very popular million downloads video game on HIV awareness, on carbon pollution. We can't mandate that, and we don't. That is not our goal. Our goal is to get people who care about this issue on both sides, both the game development side and, of course, the activist side. For the activists, the people working on a social cause, it can stimulate for them new ideas about getting their message out. For the game developers, it can stimulate new stories and new topics to create their next big game out of that. And so eventually, you'll see more and more products that address social issues as well.
Kate, to what extent decentralized events can help towards reaching this goal that Joshua mentioned?
Well, I think one of the things that what helps with these kinds of events, and and I just as a footnote to what Joshua just said, I totally agree that the most successful games I've seen at highlighting serious issues, we often talk about serious games, but it tends to be more effective when you have a game that is just designed to be a good experience, a good narrative that happens to address topics that can be quite serious. Like, for example, one of the major franchises out there, Battlefield, created by Electronic Arts, their next game takes place about 20 years or so in our future and deals with climate change. And climate change is very much at the forefront of the whole environment in which the action takes place. Now, of course, the game is still focused on combat because that's the whole point of that franchise. But still, we're seeing more and more mainstream games that are willing to incorporate these kinds of very serious, real world issues into the games. And so the player is in a way, they're forced to think about this, and I think it's a form of passive learning in a way, in very much in the same way that games like Age of Empires has gotten a lot of people interested in history. In games like Assassin's Creed, even though it's an action game, the games all take place in real world locations like medieval Venice or ancient Egypt, and the world building that the teams do is very, very accurate. And so there's a whole cultural element of helping educate people in a passive way. As far as the events go and helping focus people around doing things like this, what's really powerful about the theme approach, like I mentioned before, is that you can choose to take a theme that does have a particular, angle to it, whether it's, it could be climate change, it could be conservation, it could be any number of things that we want it to be. And all of the different developers, most game developers, they love a challenge. So if you give them something specific, like, I want you to give us a game or create a game that can help educate people about climate change, for example. Let's say that that's the theme. And a lot of game developers will take that as a great challenge because, especially from all the different perspectives about how there's so many different aspects to the very big issue of climate change. So how do you educate people about that? What exactly are you trying to, sway their opinion about? In much the same way I've seen games over the last year that were very focused on the pandemic, helping, like there's been games that help try and convince people that it's a good thing to be vaccinated. So there's actual games that help impress upon people that, because one of the most powerful things about games as a medium is that they are what I would call an empathy engine, much more so than I think any other form of media, because it's interactive and it puts you in the experience itself, and you have to interact rather than just passive watching like a movie or a television show. And that interactivity is really, really powerful to the human experience, and that helps build empathy. And so the more we can do that, and especially in an event-based environment, because we're all focused on the same thing, we're all focused on the same goal or the same theme, it could be a really powerful effect. Especially when you leave a game jam, and at the end of the jam, like in our case, you've got literally thousands and thousands of games that are all focused on the same idea. And so you have this huge treasure of perspectives around a single issue.
Kate, I fully agree, and I have seen it working in action, especially when we have run activities regarding media and news literacy. But I would like to ask you, how easy is actually to tackle or to compete in relation with commercial actually games when you actually try to build a more, let's say, not politically motivated, I would say, game, or a serious game, let's say, when you try actually to build a serious game in contrast with the game industry. How is it to achieve that?
No, that's a great question, because I think that's often seen as one of the biggest challenges of people who want to create games for impact. I like Joshua, I have a good relationship with the Games for Change folks, and I would say they really they're wholly focused on this very issue, is creating games that can create social change, political change, environmental change, whatever that change might be defined. And basically, what the last couple of decades have taught us is that there is no competition. You cannot create most serious games are not going to succeed on any level, even close to anything that's commercial, or I would say, more entertainment focused, as Joshua pointed out earlier. So we have to concede the fact that creating a game that's going to be designed for social impact or political impact or something like that, it's unlikely that it's going to reach the same audience. And it's mainly because those kinds of games just are not as much at the forefront of what people want to play. That's why I think in my opinion, the better approach is to see how can we influence mainstream game development to be willing and let's say courageous enough to take on topics that are far more serious. And we have been seeing that trend over the last, I would say decade or so. There's, just like I gave the example of Battlefield, there are more and more games in the mainstream that are willing to take on topics that are controversial or challenging to think about. There's certain narratives that discuss all kinds of issues, around social issues, racial representation, a lot of, racial tension, gender representation, all of these things. There's a lot of games that have explored these themes in the last few years, and these are all mainstream games that sell millions of copies. And honestly, I think there's that ultimately is going to be the way that that greater influence happens. But that being said, I still think there's very much a role for games that are specialized in, serious games or, games for change. There is always a role for those. The key is, we have to connect those games with people of influence. So like influencers on Twitch or influencers on YouTube, getting these people to look at the games and to highlight those games as part of what they generally look at. So I think we kind of have to look for new ways to assert these types of games into what's already the mainstream conversation. And I don't think that's super hard to do. It just, we have to be, it starts with getting a foothold in certain influencers who are willing to discuss, let's say, for example, they're talking about Dragon Age of Empires and all this other stuff. But then let's say one of the episodes that they do is about a serious game, and if they could do that for an audience of like, some of these people have, millions of people in their audience, even doing that every once in a while, I think would really help elevate the exposure and the importance of making games like this.
Yes, thank you, Kate. I think all these are great examples, and I really will emphasize, and this is my question to Joshua. Joshua, have you foreseen, and how will you distribute these games that you have created? Because many of them are really good ones, as we have seen. Joshua?
Myself on mute. I just following up before I answer that question, because I do have one answer for that, but I wanted to follow up to what Kate said and your previous question, and I really believe that gamers and game developers are going to save the world. They have they're just the way that their minds are wired to address problems, I think is something we need to bring into any type of problems around the world. I won't use the word gamification because it's a little bit overused, but there's an element of looking at problems with a level building, those badges type of approach where you're taking it one step at a time, when you're making sure people remain engaged rather than saying, here's dumping a whole mess of, here's all the problems and here's all the answers and here, you figure it out. The way that game designers and I think gamers themselves approach that is, how do I incentivize people to make their way through this complicated challenge, whether it is racial reconciliation or climate change or competing democratic voices in building civil society, free press, and all of these different challenges that we have around the world. There's so much in this world that pushes us to be polarized, to take or give up sometimes. Just say we can't do it. It's just too big, and I don't know what to do. So I'm just going to go into my own little circle in my bubble. And I think the way solution provided by game designers is important. So it's not just about creating games that will have market appeal. It's about the thinking that goes behind game development that is so much needed around the world. But in addressing your specific question, there's different markets. There's a commercial market, and that's already democratized now because we have Steam and we have different digital platforms where you can sell and download games. So you don't have to go through traditional gatekeepers like a store or a major publisher who has access to shelf space, right? You can get on a virtual online store and download whether it's Steam or Xbox or PlayStation stores, you can download games and play them, independent games, and some of them occasionally do very, very well. But there's also an educational market, right? Or the health sector or doctors. Games can be used in those sectors where you have a captive audience in a way. Now, typically, we don't have very high opinions of educational games. There are some in America, for Americans especially, that stay with us forever. I'm thinking about games like Oregon Trail and Math Blasters and those early games on the Apple IIe in the 80s that, you know, really resonate with people. And they were very effective to teach a very specific topic. But a lot of times we think educational games are bad games. And sometimes they're right. But that doesn't mean we should give up on this market. And we shouldn't, I think especially during the pandemic, we're all looking at different ways to improve virtual learning and hybrid learning. And I don't think that's going away. So we're trying to introduce educators and education policymakers with this community so that they can understand that there's a lot to choose from. In the United States, one of the biggest complaints for really decades is that we don't have much of a civics curriculum that's teaching American government and the role of citizens in the responsibilities of citizens in a country to make democracy work. So one of the most important tools to educate civics now is a game. And that's being used across the United States. It was originally created by, I mean, it had some star power, like our former Supreme Court Justice, Sandra Day O'Connor. She promoted it, got some media attention, and eventually schools started adopting it. So educational markets can be important. I'm having a separate discussion with the UN, and the UN is able to convene all of the major game publishers like Sony and Epic and all of that to talk about climate sustainability. So they're doing everything from getting these companies to commit to lowering their emissions through the games that they make. I don't really understand exactly how but they're trying to convene these companies so that they can make those commitments, but also include it in their stories and narratives over the next 20, 30 years. And so there's that way as well.
Thank you, Joshua. And what you highlighted is extremely important. And if you will allow me to just make a quick comment on what you have said, and Kate as well. I think that the crucial element it is this networking that you just both highlighted. Yes, serious game, it is difficult to compete the commercial ones because you actually highlighted. But what they have as an advantage it is that through networks like this through Global Game Jam, it is a very important network that you actually can disseminate these serious games as DCN, as a network that has this enrichment, or actually bringing in close regional, national, and global efforts that actually could introduce gaming as a platform. For example, UN has produced a game regarding the journey of a refugee from Syria up to Europe, etc. But I think that it would have been more, let's say, successful because it was a success, if it has been promoted through the networks of NGOs, for example, they were dealing with refugees, etc. Or if they were doing things like gather children, as you have mentioned, in the schools, like to promote civic educational refugees awareness, etc. These are elements that I think that if we all partner and systematically actually join forces towards that end, it would be very successful. But I think that I talked enough. Professors really like to speak a lot, but I think that I have overdone it. I would like to open up the floor to the participants, actually. If you have any questions in this very interesting discussion through our very interesting speakers, the floor is yours. if there are any other questions. Sonia, I see Sonia. Sonia, do you want to actually say something about your network? Sonia actually, she's from Slovenia. She has been part of a DCN workshop, and she's working a lot on news regarding children. Sonia, if you're with us.
Hi, Nikos, thank you for the
Awesome.
work. Okay, I will also start video. So you can see me. Hi. Yes, what I'm doing, I'm an editor of an online newspaper for children, but gamification, everything game related is very important for children. So I'm actually looking into how to reach children through games and how to provide them news information through either gaming platforms or games. But I would say that games are not really for news, more for media literacy campaigns. But the platforms themselves, they could be used for providing important and reliable news information, and thus teaching children about reliable sources of information and media. I'm not really very skilled in gaming territory. I heard what Joshua said about gamers saving the world. Definitely, they can be very helpful to saving media literacy and media for children, and raising this new generation of media literate active citizens. And I would be really interested in any sources of how to start with all of this, because this is for me an uncharted territory. I have no computer skills, but I do know that this is something we need to introduce into our organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia. We have a question from Meet. Meet, the floor is yours. Meet, you raise your hand. Oh, Joshua, thank you for Harmony Square. Okay. Joshua shared in the chat room our games regarding disinformation, because Joshua has worked a lot on that field as well. If there are no other questions, I would like actually to end today's webinar. I would like to thank very much both Kate and Joshua for being with us and sharing actually their expertise and actually this interesting, and for having this interesting discussion. Factitious, we will translate it in Greek and in Armenian as DCN, Joshua, and we will, and thank you for sharing it. We will actually initiate it, and we will invite you and Kate as well to be in this initiative. I would like to thank both Global Game Jam that partnered with DCN and World Learning and State Department Citizens Exchanges Office for bringing actually this event and the other series of events that it will follow. I would like actually to thank you for being part of this webinar. We will see you tomorrow, that we have another event regarding Games Against Disinformation with bad news. Joshua, Kate, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and for spending 1 hour with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's great. It's great to meet everyone. I'm looking forward to being a part of this.
Looking forward.
Thank you. I posted a few links. I know the Harmony Square, you'll be talking about that tomorrow. So that's a good seminar for people interested. I'm also very, very interested in the whole media literacy space and how games can help. I know the Factitious game has been well known. You can find news articles about it. I don't know the link to the game exactly. And then there's an organization called National Association for Media Literacy Education. They have a conference every year. I think basically this is a very important field. I think the United States Department of Education is also going to be doing more in this space. So we agree with your concern on that.
Thank you, Joshua, very much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me.
No, it was our pleasure, and thank you very much. Have a nice evening, morning, depending the time zone.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.